Welcome to the Low Carb MD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor.
Hello and welcome back to the Low Carb MD podcast. This is going to be a fun one already. I got one of my compatriots here, I could tell, and we have Tro also. And it's good that we're all together, and I'm looking forward to this. Fun stuff. Tro,
this
good
is
to see
be
you,
awesome.
man.
Somebody I've interacted with for a number of years. We share similar, I think, values and similar interests. And, we both have some interest in examining the supplement space. And, certainly, we have similar sort of critical thinking mindset, I think. And I'm very happy to have Mike Roberto come on here as the CEO of PricePlow. He's written articles that are just fantastic that I've read. And I've talked with him about supplement industry in the past. And I'm just hoping he can share all his insight and wisdom, over 2 decades working in the health and wellness space. So Mike Roberto, thanks to have you here. Maybe you can do a better intro than we did.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Actually, before we begin, I have to thank you guys. Day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out, you guys are doing such great work. And if anyone hasn't thanked you lately, I'd like to say thank you. You guys are true spiritual warriors, and it is greatly appreciated. You are truly changing the world. So thank you so much. Thank you for having me on, but thank you for just being you and doing what you do, because you guys are just bricks in this wall, and it's amazing to watch. And so, my name is Mike Roberto. I am the founder of PricePlow. We kind of serve as thought leaders or like scientific and regulatory influencers kind of in the dietary supplement space. I started in 2008, and I'll kind of give my background. But just so everyone knows, before we begin, I'm not here to like shill a bunch of supplements. And if I do mention any certain brands or ingredients, I will be stating any disclosures of any of our sponsorships and stuff like that. So I'm going to play it straight and everything. We are more sports nutrition heavy, like focusing on performance, a lot of male demographics. But as I've kind of aged out of things a little bit, I've gotten into other things as well. So guys, thanks again for having me on here. One quick question: Is Dr. Brian going to be able to stay a little bit later than Tro, or?
Yeah, I can outlast Tro for sure.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks again. I'm in the presence of greatness here, everyone. I love it. Okay, so yeah. I was born, so I'm 42 years old right now. I was born in 1981, the best time to be born, Italian-American family, suburbs of Cleveland. So growing up in the 80s and 90s, as you guys know, it was carbs, 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 and then more carbs, carbs, no fat, all that stuff. And so that kind of played into a lot of like how I ended up getting into the low carb space and everything. So growing up, pretty athletic person. But I like to say my age. I'm 42 because one of my theories is that I kind of joke, but seriously say that I don't really think you should take dietary advice from anyone under the age of 40 or so. And I seriously mean that because it takes time for the toxicity to build up. As we know, like the wheels start falling off around like 35 through 45. And what you can do as a 20-year-old ain't the same as what you could do as a 40-year-old. And so I feel like I am, kind of entering a new paradigm, and I feel like I'm kind of keeping the wheels on pretty well. So I get more confident with like what I talk about, but I kind of like to continue giving my background with that. So like growing up, I was relatively athletic, had a lot of allergies, but in, around 3rd to 5th grade, I started gaining weight around 3rd to 5th grade. And then by 6th grade, 7th grade, I was pretty much like full-blown fat. Like one of the fatter kids, had glasses and stuff in class. Now, not like obese by like what we see today by like those standards, but I was one of the bigger kids in class. And like part of this was, like the fortified cereals and the milk. And I was eating like 3-4 bowls of sugar cereal with all that junk. Like you've heard the story, and it got me as well. Thankfully, fortunately, I started growing out of things, and like in the late 1990s, I found swimming, and I began leaning out, getting taller. And I was moderately decent at swimming and everything, and kind of realized that in order to stay lean, I have to like have an extremely high activity level. And like out exercising your diet type of situation. Graduated high school in 2000, and then I played some club water polo while studying engineering in college. And that's when I was around 2001 or so, searching, the early stages of Google for some protein powder. Started learning about protein, and I realized that there was it was very unorganized and like lots of different flavors and sizes. And I was like, there should be a price comparison site for this. So keep that in my back pocket. And I graduated in 2005, moved south, and eventually got a sales job out in Southern California. Now, by my mid-20s, I was kind of like not able to outrun the diet as much anymore. Kind of like I naturally fall into like kind of like the skinny, fat dad bod type physique a little bit. And it was starting to, the wheels were, you can see the wheels starting to wobble a little bit, not falling off yet, but it was kind of happening. I wasn't really happy in corporate America, even though like Southern California is a blast. Energy levels are super high. We were like a lot of surfing. I got into open water swimming, sand volleyball and stuff. And so I take this idea out of my back pocket and I start programming PricePlow in 2007, make a price comparison site for protein powders and all this stuff and pre-workout supplements, all the fun stuff that the guys like, and launch it in late 2008. And so first version is always going to be bad, but it was out there. And then now what? Like I realized you can't just have like deals and coupons and stuff and expect Google to magically send you traffic. So I started looking at like, okay, who's doing what and who should I engage with? And I ended up finding this website, marksdailyapple.com. You guys ever hear of that guy? So yeah. Mark Sisson. And I read this. So it was end of 2008. I just get back from Cleveland, Ohio, big Italian, like carved out feast to the max. And I'm like going through the carb hangover. I'm just like, yeah, I'm beat up. It's going to take weeks for me to clear this thing out. I didn't understand everything. I read this article on diabetes and insulin resistance. And I'm like reading this and I'm like, this guy's talking to me. I'm like, I think I have like pre-diabetes here. And so I've always like kind of been into like evolutionary science. And so the whole primal philosophy kind of spoke to me and I'm like, you know what? All right, I'm going to try this. This makes enough sense. I go paleo in early 2000, like January 1st of 2009, basically, and pretty much never looked back. Like the transformation I had, the energy levels no longer needed the naps, fat just falling off. Like the transformation was uncanny. And that kind of fueled my low carb experience for quite a while. So I always thank Mark Sisson for, I wouldn't say like saved my life, but I definitely like that man changed my life for sure. So I stay like with PricePlow, I stay within like the sports nutrition space and we start realizing that content is king, or I start realizing content is king. And I had a couple of like articles go viral in terms of like blogging and everything. So I start leaning into that and, things go decently well. We end up moving back to Texas, 2013. And around 2016, this thing comes, these supplements start coming out and they're like, and this thing called the keto diet starts coming out. And so I was like, okay, well, makes sense. I understand this. I was probably ketogenic a lot of those beach days and everything. And, but I started getting into keto because there are supplements to test, so I'm like, making YouTube videos. I take some of these supplements. I got the Precision Extra ketone meter and I realized some of these supplements are actually increasing blood glucose and dropping me out of ketosis. So I make some videos. They go like mini viral in our little world and everything. And I'm like, oh man, like this is crazy. And so like, I made some content with that, was testing different amino acids and learned a lot, and then eventually having a CGM, you learn a ton about yourself and everything. Early 2017, my wife's pregnant. We end up going to KetoCon in Austin and there is a speaker because we were living in Austin at that time. There's a speaker named Dr. Benjamin Bickman. I think you guys might know him. Yeah, and he gives just one of his like blowout epic performances, great conversation, great presentation. And then someone asked like, hey, how can we follow you? And he's like, oh yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm like, Twitter? I got an old Twitter account from a business, old personal account. So I jump on Twitter and I'm like, oh, I see him engaging with this guy named Dr. Tro. I'm like, whoa, this guy, I'm like, this is my people right here. Start following Dr. Tro. I guess, like, as you could say, the rest is history. So, so thanks for being you, Tro, because you've like gotten me more into this. So I kind of fell out of keto a little bit, having our daughter later on in 2017, eating more junk and everything. Didn't really gain a ton of weight, staying low carb and everything. And then kind of took a slight disappearance from Twitter, brought on a partner really in late 2019, early 2020. That's Ben, who you see on a lot of like PricePlow's Instagram videos and everything. And we really start diving into the industry more fully. I kind of like, I don't want to get into it too much, but I missed in 2020, I missed talking about all the diet stuff that we argued about. And it went in a different direction. I was like, you know what, this is getting dicey. I'm out of here. Time to focus on business. And stuck with that for the next couple of years. And then into late 2022 and 2023, I start finding, we're like deeper into the industry. I'm getting like way more sciencey. I'm like what you can call a PubMed warrior. And we start start discovering like a new paradigm out there, and I come back to Twitter, and Dr. Cho sees me arguing about salt or something like that, or olive oil, you know, all that stuff, and invites me to the podcast. So that's pretty much like the story here to there. But within that time, like we do a lot of scientific stuff, a lot of like, if you have a new ingredient, we'll flesh it out. We'll talk about it. We'll do a long form podcast. We'll do the 1 minute video explaining it. And then I've kind of like built up this, like my, you know, general thesis of how things should be. But in general, like, and I can get into that next, but in general, I'm not always going to tell you to take lots and lots and lots of supplements. So like, as we get older, we realize like, we gotta worry about the long term and everything. So that's my quick introduction. I don't know if you want me to keep going, or if you have any questions right there.
Well, yeah, I just want to chime in. I used to be, you know, like if you're like you, I have a part of me that finds the evolutionary sort of paleo primal mindset, you know, a little bit attractive, like the natural, just, you know, so I've always had a hard time, you know, with supplementation. And then, you know, I've changed, you know, even with like things like testosterone and things like, you know, magnesium and just, you know, hormones for women, you know, a lot of these things I at first I was, you know, more apprehensive about because of the same things I think that you may have been apprehensive about. But then you look at it and it's like, wait a second, magnesium has been taken out of our food supply.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Our hormones have come down over the last 50 years, right? Unexplainably, right? Probably explained by metabolic syndrome and really crappy food environments, you know? And then, you know, part of me is like, well, wait a second, you know, maybe we shouldn't just fear the supplementation just for the sake of fearing it, you know? And that's, you know, and then you get into this whole world of like, are the supplements actually what they say they are? Mm-hmm. You know, now you start to embrace supplementation. I did at least. And then I'm like, well, wait a second, like, how do I know what they say is in the bottle is actually in the bottle? And then you go down that rabbit hole of what are the contaminants? What are, you know, what are actually in them? What's the heavy metals? Or, you know, if you look at protein, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, you know, and vitamins, you know, the contaminants, the protein, the BPA, the plastics, you know, and then you go even further and further. Wait a second, what about my olive oil? Wait a second, what are they injecting in the meat that I get from New Zealand or whatever to make it look more red? And now all of a sudden it's like you feel like you have a tinfoil hat on because you actually just want to know everything. So
yep. Okay. So
yeah,
to speak on that. So when I started this in 2008, the industry was nothing like it is now. Like we have improved by so many leaps and bounds. There is, when people say the supplement industry is not regulated, that couldn't be like any more false. Like it is definitely regulated. Now we could talk about enforcement. That's sometimes the issue, but there are definitely lots of regulations, laws, guidelines, everything making it. So like we don't have a business affiliation with this company, but I know the CEO pretty well. And I could just say, when in doubt, Now Foods. They test everything. They will test other people's stuff. I had a meeting with our Senator Markway Mullen and Jim Emmy, the CEO of Now Foods. And like, basically like one of the issues is that Amazon's selling a lot of the expensive ingredients and they go and test them and they're not there. So I trust Now Foods with everything. And so like the orange bottle, if you're not sure, then you could check them out. There's but other than that, like, so we start seeing what contract manufacturers who are the good guys, and we kind of built up this network of good guys and maybe not so good guys in our space. Who's testing? Who might not do as much testing? And we kind of learned like we kind of know where some of the bodies are buried. And so, long story short, one of the great ways of determining, you know, if someone posts a third-party test, this is an affiliate disclaimer. Revive MD is a great company that has a lot of stuff like their magnesium glycinate. They'll post third-party lab tests. We work with them. Good stuff. Same things, of course, with like Now Foods. But if they're not doing that level, you know, if they're not posting third-party lab tests, you could look for any manufacturer is NSF certified or NSF certified for sport. If that logo is on the label, that means they're at a legit manufacturer. No, you're not just going to get that in just some junk manufacturer. They come in there and they audit. Also, there's a really good for like drug tested athletes. BSCG is they test for banned substances control group, I think, and so they test probably more than anything. And then also Informed Sport, Informed Choice. So you might not be a drug tested athlete, but if you see like those labels, then you know that like then it's going to be pretty legit. So that's kind of my thing. But yeah, like back in the day, things were a lot dirtier, and we've definitely come along as an industry, and we've kind of, and we couldn't do this model back in the day. Like we do have sponsored content on our site. Back in the day of 2008, I couldn't do that because there weren't enough brands. There was like one brand that was testing stuff. So that's the exciting thing. And it's at the point now where with these brands where I know that they're manufacturers, sometimes I can't disclose them. I trust them more than the food. Like I've never seen a lab test for that Oreo cookie, but I have seen lab tests on magnesium glycinate, 99.8% pure or whatever. So that's definitely an important thing. So those are some of my like real quick guidelines. And berberine might be an ingredient we're going to talk about later. Like now food's tested some of those, and a lot of those that you see on Amazon aren't so good. So you sometimes got to stick with the brands that are too big to get sued, And so,
yeah, I've used Consumer Lab, which is a not-for-profit, to like look at the labels at least and look for contaminants. I've also used, the Clean Label Project, which I hope you talk about. That was in 2018, and Consumer Reports followed on in 2019, looking for protein, the brands of protein and the contaminants in them. We also use LabDoor, these are all people who do third-party testing. Do you have any other place to go to see if your brand of supplement is a high-quality supplement? Should you just come to your website and it spells it out, or where,
You can. Our blog gets the most traffic we have, but in general, like our site's going to list anything. We still do have the price comparison stuff where we send you to various retailers, and there might be some stuff that is less savory on our site. So I'm not going to say we are not like a LabDoor where we're only listing stuff that's been tested. Unfortunately, we don't have that. I am into the testing stuff, but that's just not the trajectory. I've kind of gotten more into the science, but less into the testing. I think like you've listed kind of between the two things I listed and you listed, I think we're pretty much in good footing right there. So,
yeah. The other issue is cost. Like if I'm going to take berberine, like do I have to spend this huge amount of money on this brand, or is there a cheaper brand that's comparable? Those kind of things. Is that in order to help the consumer out, because some of these supplements can get expensive if you're taking it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's marketing because all the studies show that more expensive stuff is more attractive and everything. I mean, that's where I get back to now foods really. In the case of berberine, there's another ingredient that we do promote that I highly believe in. That's a berberine metabolite that gets converted back into berberine. I'm a big fan of that. I don't know if you want to like dig into the science of that. Like we can do that.
Totally.
Okay.
I'll explain it to Tro later after we're done recording.
Okay, well, first, I gotta first kind of give my general thesis on things is like with some notable exceptions in terms of certain minerals and stuff. I want to say that we've become more toxic than deficient, and so with a lot of stuff. So that's the first thing, and so when we are doing stuff, when anyone's doing stuff to get more healthy, you're generally either more additive or subtractive, and so in the supplement space, inherently by nature, we're kind of more additive. But as I've gotten older, like I've said, I've become a little bit more subtractive. You guys seem a little bit subtractive in the way that, you have a demographic who's insulin resistant or carbohydrate sensitive or whatever. And so you subtract the carbs. So I've kind of become more on that wavelength of being more subtractive and adding just one thing at a time. And then after that, the reason is I've gotten more into liver health, and I don't pretend to know everything about the liver, but in general, the liver is the seat of all health to me. And if you have a sick liver, chances are your insulin resistant and sick. If you have a healthy liver, chances are you're doing pretty good health-wise too. And the liver it's going to filter, process, and sometimes store a lot of the metabolic stuff, the waste, the trash, whatever it is that you deal with. And basically nearly everything is going to go through the liver. Now, the reason I bring this up is every time you decide to add something new to your diet, you have to consider, is the liver, what's this going to, is this worth the cost? It's one more thing for my liver to do. Do I want to do that? Or do I want my liver to get on with getting rid of fatty liver and stuff? So that's kind of where I look at things is the liver comes first. And that's kind of led to some of these dietary shifts. And then I look at things beyond that. I look at fertility and then performance. So liver, fertility, and performance in that order. So if something is bad for your fertility, chances are it's bad for your health in that aspect. And on the other side, if something, and so being in the sports nutrition side of the thing, we like performance. So if something might boost performance, but it doesn't harm the liver or fertility, there's a good chance I'm going to want to tinker with it. So like a couple of examples, in my opinion, and I don't like, I'm not, so like an example is caffeine, for instance. I don't think there's enough data to show that caffeine is bad for the liver in reasonable amounts. I don't think it affects fertility. Otherwise, none of us would probably be here. But it definitely does enhance performance. So that's something that I'm willing to tinker with. On the other hand, like, and I'm not going to judge, I never judge. I'm not on TRT or testosterone, but I think that testosterone, it can harm fertility. It can harm the liver if like done improperly and everything. And so in that case, it's something that I personally am not going to do at least for another like 10 years. And so that's like, those are some of my, like kind of my mantra of like my thinking of, should we be considering something? And then beyond that, muscle meat rules, as I think you guys have talked about plenty, ruminant meat, especially muscle meat. Like there's so many supplements that you probably don't need to take. It depends on how much you eat, but like ranging from the creatine, the carnitine, choline, B vitamins, taurine, protein powders, even like if you eat enough muscle meat, you're probably not going to have to do all this. So, and then we're left with a lot of the most important minerals. So that's kind of like what I want to like get out before talking about berberine. But, and the next thing I really want to emphasize, because I do have like a business relationship, is that nobody, you can repeat after me, that nobody has an herb deficiency. Okay. Like Trope, you don't have a berberine deficiency.
Parsley deficiency? No?
There's no berberine deficiency. Okay. So like we're looking for this to like supplement the diet. And we can talk about like the regulatory definitions of supplement, but we're looking for something to supplement the diet. But it's sometimes like I don't think people should plan on being on berberine for life. You can get a desired effect out of it. And I do believe in that effect strongly, but it's like, let's be very clear that, you know, you don't have an herb deficiency. You might have like whatever, a magnesium deficiency. So berberine is really cool because
those
it doesn't.
Phytonutrients, I need those. I was told I need phytonutrients though, you know, and
Depends on
fiber.
which was. I mean,
And
yeah,
fiber.
I am.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
controversial take though. I have jumped on the fiber train. So yeah, I'm happy to get into all this. So yeah, with berberine
Let's go.
though.
Yeah, let's talk about berberine. Let's talk
Yeah.
about like let's take one step back because I want to make sure we
Yeah.
get this done. Liver, I think we all agree liver toxicity is a big issue, fatty liver disease. And I'll never forget being at a conference. I was the new kid, and Rob Sivas, who's one of the smarter guys around, is on one side. Gary Taubes, the other one. We're talking about fatty liver disease and how to cure it. And all these people are talking about all the drugs they're developing and all this stuff. And Rob Sivas is doing his little work, and he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, I don't do surgery on people with fatty liver disease," and he does liver transplant and like gastric bypass. All of them, like, all your patients have fatty liver disease. What are you talking about? He goes, "Yeah, we resolve it first, then do surgery." How do you do that? 2 days of keto, 1 day of fasting.
Awesome.
100% revert. Like, why are we looking for a drug for this? Like and Gary Taubes said, BS, that's not true. And he goes, "Okay, let me show you my data." And he shows the liver biopsy pre and post. You're like, holy cow, this is ridiculous, right?
Mhm.
At that time, I was like, oh my gosh, there's more to this thing. But the liver toxicity, I mean, I see it all the time with, poor liver health. And so are there any supplements that we can add in when we're changing lifestyle that really do help with liver toxicity or
Remove. Right.
Yeah. It's more about a removal. I think
Mhm.
you could look into NAC. That's one that kind of has been shown to help, but like, especially like for so NAC, the cysteine it helps you produce more glutathione, which helps you remove a lot of the like acetaldehyde, which might be familiar for people who deal with hangovers and stuff. It's not the alcohol that hurts you, it's the acetaldehydes left over. So sometimes like there's some support, but again, we're like doing all this additive stuff. In my opinion, from what I'm starting to realize, it is actually like one of the things to start to avoid is to beware of the fat soluble vitamins and the heavy metals. And I think that we're getting to a toxicity situation. And over the last year, I've been on a pretty low vitamin A diet, and I've gone down the rabbit hole, and it has changed a lot of things for me. And I think that if you look at the data, and the data is all over the place, I'm going to be putting it into like one big thing. A lot of people, there's too much talk about like a lot of about people being deficient. That's not the case. Most people are vitamin A toxic. And when you're vitamin A toxic, things start to fall apart, and it just happens slowly over the course of time. And you could track it through. It's tough to track though. It's very tough to measure. And that's the thing. But you can track it through so many different variables. But like the retinol binding protein 4, for instance, is highly associated with problems in fatty liver, as well as diabetes, higher blood sugar, insulin resistance, lower testosterone, like the whole metabolic gamut and everything. So one of the things I start thinking about is like, if you get your serum retinol tested, and the serum retinol is going to stay within a range, but if you have a relatively high, or you're not on a low serum retinol level and your RBP4 is kind of high, like I'd start looking at getting rid of vitamin A, and I can kind of like tear through that. But so I'm more of a remover. And I've even, and this is going to be a controversial take. I'm not going to go hard in the paint on this. I've gotten rid of vitamin D from my diet, and that was because of calcification and joint pain. And so a lot of people are dealing with joint issues. I think like we kind of got out of control on the vitamin D side of things with in 2020. And what's funny is that if you lower your vitamin A levels, vitamin A and D are antagonists of each other. So are we really vitamin D deficient, or are we vitamin A toxic? And I'm going on the latter of those two. I think we're vitamin A toxic. Things start to resolve when you start getting rid of antagonists. So it's not always about like add more of this. It's sometimes about remove some of that. But
So
for me,
with
it's like,
subtraction, Mike,
yeah.
if we're subtracting vitamin A, how do we decrease our vitamin A intake?
No, that's where we're going to have some battles, because the main one I had to remove was eggs. And so egg yolks was the main one. But basically, a lot of like pork, dairy, eggs are gonna be the top three for a lot of people that follow you. And then you have those are the animal sources that have actual retinol or retinol esters in them. The plant-based sources are more like provitamin A carotenoids, anything orange or yellow, sweet potatoes, carrots. Carrots aren't even supposed to be orange. That's a whole other story. Carrots should be white. Eat the white carrots. But yes, anything with lots of beta carotene. And that's kind of like part of the supplement industry where I started going down this rabbit hole. I realized way back when I was writing when I was making the first version of PricePlow, I was doing like a little bit of research on each category, and I wrote like pretty much like word for word. I said like beware or like do not do not take beta carotene if you are a smoker, because at that time there was a lot of research on beta carotene, which is the provitamin A plant version of vitamin A. With smokers causing all sorts of all-cause mortality, and like just like the numbers are through the roof. So I wrote that, and I have it on archive.org. And so I remember this as I start learning about vitamin A, which was from a good friend / employee of mine, started telling me about this. I'm like, yeah, I did write about this. And like when we start writing about vitamin A, we never, like for skin supplements, we never had like that much good stuff to like, we never found that much great stuff. Like I know it can like melt your skin on a face melt and everything with like, if you do it topical, but supplementally, I never had like a ton of good stuff. So it's like, okay, this kind of makes sense. You start looking at it, and the beta carotene is now, since then, we have multiple meta-analyses that are showing like increased all-cause mortality, lung cancer mortality, bone fractures is a big thing, more arthritis. And so I'm like, oh man, like things have evolved. But I remember like digging into this years ago. So it started like all coming together. And so I'm more on the removal side of things. And if concerned about vitamin D, like I get tons of sunshine. I love swimming outside still. There's vitamin D lamps and stuff. I would rather do that than take something that could potentially cause bone issues or calcification. That's my take. That's going to be controversial, but I'm not a vitamin D guy. I'd rather use the sun lamp. And I have some people coming to me around my age in the industry. Like I got like, they're getting bone bumps and stuff. And I'm like, that's calcification. And if you look at like vitamin D is actually used as rat poison, and it kills the rats in higher dose, like very high doses, of course, but it kills the rats through a calcification process. And since this is a fat soluble molecule, I get concerned that we are slowly accumulating all of these levels. Vitamin A, fat soluble again. And then the third one, I think this is less controversial. A lot of people haven't gone down this, is copper. Copper is also fat soluble. It leads to infertility. I think it's in like the IUD rings and everything, estrogenic, obesogenic, and like people get anxious and like cancer cells accumulate it. And so I've gone from adding all these things to first removing these things. And as I've removed vitamin A from my diet, I have been able to add more carbs in. I'm probably one of the higher carb users that you've had on recently. And so that's been like this big shift where I'm like, oh, I lost eggs, but I got oats, white rice, bananas, and apples back. And then that's fixed some of the potassium issues. So I know Tro's not liking this part. Yeah,
No.
but no, so like,
Stop recording.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Jack, don't edit that out. Jack, edit
Well,
that
you know,
out.
and that's funny. It's like the potassium issue. It's like, it's always been funny to me as a doc. I'm like, how come they don't recommend, like, all the doctors, like, you have to eat more bananas, your potassium's low. Like, why don't they give them avocados,
Zucchini.
zucchini?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Avocados
things
are
like that.
expensive though. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
and so-
expensive too. But I'm in California so far. I mean,
Zucchini's
part of the
cheap.
time.
Any of the squashes, have tons of potassium.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so
supposedly.
yeah, well, one of the things you start seeing when you're in the vitamin A rabbit hole is that vitamin A actually blocks potassium channels. So we see like right now there's a surge of trends of these hydration supplements. I'm sure you guys may have seen like Logan Paul's Prime drink or whatever. It's like all potassium and no sodium. And the FDA doesn't want you actually having more than 99 milligrams of potassium in a single capsule because like there were concerns about cardiovascular risk. Well, these kids are taking these like hydration drinks with tons of potassium. No one's having adverse events because I think we are so potassium deficient. We have to and we're so overloaded.
And magnesium deficient, right? If you don't have magnesium, you're not storing potassium.
Yeah,
It's just going to get lost, right?
And,
so
and so they all work together. And so like, that's where I'm starting to like piece these things together and it's all like starting to make sense. So rather than, I like potassium. And I think like if you're low on energy, taking potassium is one of the first things to do. The problem is that most of the potassium foods, most foods that have more potassium than sodium are going to be a little bit carby, like the ones I listed, or at least the fruits. And those are the fun ones. So that's where like, I cause a little bit of trouble here, but
well, I don't think you do because you're metabolically healthy. It's different than our 350-pound diabetic with sugars of 400.
Right.
In that case, we go, okay, let's not worry about, let's get the sugars down first. And then, I think a lot of people can get more into the carb, like Sean Baker. If he wants to have carbs, sometimes you think that's going to do anything to him. I mean, it's not a big deal because he's metabolically healthy. Right. So I think those are all issues. And it's funny because I always think about it from a perspective of, okay, God made us, and all these people all of our ancestors weren't taking supplements for all this stuff. They were going out in the sun and they were relaxing, having a good time. They didn't go, oh, let me take my vitamin D and let me take my zinc, right? Or copper. Right. So I'm hearing people go, oh, I take copper and I feel great. It's like, well, if copper is causing it, I mean, it's just weird that people are supplementing stuff that could hurt them, right? In large amounts. Like some people are like, I want my vitamin D above 140. It's like, I don't think that's a good idea, probably, right? We don't want your insulin too low or too high. We want to be in the right spot.
Right. Yeah. But and so for those people, obviously, like we're always going to agree that diet comes first and stuff. Berberine does become like a pretty cool tool at that point. Like the mechanism, it upregulates AMPK, which we like kind of say is like the we need energy now enzyme, and it gets things going. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about, magnesium, potassium, zinc, you just mentioned, huge zinc picolinate fan. It gets to the point where there's too much data to ignore. Creatine is one of these that we always argue about with the governments and stuff, and mainstream media, but like there's too much data to ignore. And so Berberine's almost like getting to that point. And berberine
has an effect on the gut microbiome also, right? Like that might be the major benefit.
Yeah. Well, but it also, in order to convert it into properly ingest it, though, you do need to have you'll do better if you have a healthy gut. So there's a bit of a berberine paradox that we sometimes talk about. And that's where we work around it by using what's known as dihydroberberine. So what happens is berberine, so there are like multiple meta-analyses where berberine has been shown to reduce fat and to improve insulin sensitivity. There's a study where 1.5 grams a day, which is a lot, outperform metformin. So it's really impressive. What happens is that berberine in the gut converts it to dihydroberberine. That gets into through the lining, and then the dihydroberberine gets converted back to berberine in the plasma. So what some very smart people did is they said, okay, well, they patented taking dihydroberberine as a supplement, and that's known as, this is the affiliation, disclaimer, that's known as Glucovantage, sold by an ingredient supplier called NNB Nutrition. And so it's just dihydroberberine. It kind of skips a step, and it enables people to not have to take like 1.5 grams a day, which could blast your gut. You can get away with, like, honestly, I'll be like, for me, 200 milligrams of this stuff per day, I couldn't gain weight if I tried. It's pretty insane. So I am a fan of this, but like with the disclaimer that you don't have a berberine deficiency. We're almost looking for, like, I hate to say it, but almost like a drug-like effect out of this. And I think if you are in a slump, or if you're trying to and it works best, it makes you more insulin sensitive. it works best if you're doing resistance training, like everything else does in the world. If you are going to just like take berberine and not work out and go eat 10 pounds of ice cream, you're going to make your fat more insulin sensitive. You're just going to, it could do the exact opposite you want.
It's like taking testosterone and sitting on your butt all day. It's like, okay, like one of my patients said, I've been taking steroids. They didn't do anything. I was like, were you working out? No. Well, there's more to the equation, right? So yeah, that's true. And what's the mechanism of this, dihydroberberine? Is it lowering insulin levels? Is that what it's doing? It's making you more insulin sensitive?
Yeah, so I mean, it's upregulating a couple of like the enzymes, activated protein kinase, adiponectin, I think, are the two main ones that it upregulates, and from there, it increases the glucose response, I think, and uptake. I'm not sure if it actually. I'm sure there's data.
That's what they thought about metformin, you know, the MP kinase, like that sort of pathway, increasing insulin sensitivity, right? You know, decreasing gluconeogenesis to the liver, until they labeled glucose. And then they found with metformin, Brian, I don't know if you know the study, you know how metformin works? It makes you shit out glucose. It literally makes you poop. They radio-labeled glucose. And in the terminal ileum, where the B12 deficiency comes from, basically glucose is pouring out.
So that's why the B12 deficiency is happening.
Yeah, over the long term, it's like the SGLT2 inhibitors, but it's making you poop out. You know, it's making you poop out sugar and all the GI side effects, right? So we didn't know this until this past year. I'm convinced berberine's probably the same.
Interesting.
You know,
I wouldn't. Yeah.
So you think it's binding sugar in the gut and washing it through?
No, it's actually, I think it's, you know, don't know what exactly, but glucose is just pouring out of the intestines. So probably, you know, maybe some intestinal permeability, who knows, maybe some, you know, and that's how it makes people more insulin sensitive, just like the SGLT.
Because you're lowering your sugars that way and then lowering your insulin needs.
Bingo. Yep. Yeah.
Interesting.
Air quotes. Okay.
Troy, I knew you'd come up with something smart.
Nice.
Yeah, once in a while. I guess.
6 years.
Well, it's been interesting watching some of these influencers do a turn on the metformin thing. So like,
with the exercise, it impedes some of the benefit of exercise, right? What do you think about that? Those kind of comments.
Me? I stay in my lane. I'm not going to go too much into metformin. I'm not into the GLP-1 agonist or anything like that. But I think that you got to do this through diet. And to me, the missing link, in my opinion, this new paradigm is going to be chasing vitamin A toxicity. That's really what I think is going to be the next step of fixing a lot of people and everything. But before that, like, there's a lot of other good things. You've mentioned magnesium, that as well. So a lot of things, like, so I do think that, like you mentioned pooping. So like we gotta talk about it, because if you're trying to get stuff out of your system, I want it coming out through the poop. I think that's a good idea, but like it shouldn't be used as a cheat code to add more sugar, of course. But we were talking about magnesium. I think that magnesium is so important, and you have to like clarify which magnesiums we're talking about though. And I'm not against using some of the cheaper magnesiums that don't actually go into your body, like magnesium oxide, magnesium citrate. Those might not exactly be absorbed very well, but they are great for passing stool. So if you need a little bit of help with that, I have some magnesium citrate powder around if it is needed, and it hasn't been. But I think like there's just too much data. You know, you've seen it. It's out of the food supply.
Magnesium oxide is a great way to poop more. I mean, milk of magnesia is like the time-tested, you know, resolution of constipation. That doesn't mean it's getting into your, you know, stores of magnesium.
Right.
100%. And, you know, they don't teach us in med school. That's the other problem. You probably know more about this than, you know, me and Brian do.
We're digging through. I'm digging through.
Maybe just me, not Brian. You know.
Yeah. Well, it's tough to be in all these different worlds. You guys are like the best at what you do, but and so like that's the 95. I'm the extra 5%. You know, so that's where we come in, and that's why I appreciate you having me here. Now with magnesium, I do like before bed magnesium glycinate. That's bound to glycine. The gut's not great at absorbing minerals. It is good at absorbing amino acids. So we kind of Trojan horse the magnesium onto the glycine, pull it in, you're going to get better. And then the glycine itself is pretty good for like anti-anxiety, kind of downer neurotransmitter type stuff. And so I like that before bed. But here's the kicker that's not supplement industry. topical magnesium and magnesium chloride lotions. There is no affiliation on this. There's a couple brands. LifeFlow has some stuff on Amazon. They got one that smells like vanilla, is pretty good. And then putting like maybe you got to rub it in and everything. But I swear, if you got a sore muscle, try this vanilla scented, or just the regular LifeFlow magnesium chloride. And then one of the people in the low vitamin A community that I follow, Dr. Gareth Smith, he's got the Nutrition Detective brand, where, and I haven't tried it yet, but he's got even more magnesium per like quarter teaspoon or whatever. And so topical magnesium, I think, is vastly underrated. A lot of people take magnesium baths. You could do, I prefer magnesium chloride for topical, but I've found a lot of good success with that. And I still do the magnesium glycinate before bed as well. It's tough to measure.
Is it magnesium chloride? Is that a like a lotion?
So yeah, there's magnesium chloride lotions.
Wow. All right. LifeFlow. All right. Cool.
LifeFlow on Amazon.
It's funny is what we're talking about is I had a patient, she was having a bunch of leg cramps and her husband, and she's older, and her husband came in. He's like, "Oh my gosh, he's hugging me. Thank you so much." I'm like, "You're not my patient. What do I do?" He goes, "You saved my life. My hands were killing me. I couldn't golf anymore." And so it was just TheraWorks Relief. It's a topical magnesium foam.
Awesome.
And he goes, "Look at my hands." And he goes, "I'm telling you, like my hands, I couldn't." He goes, "Once a week, I couldn't rub my wife's legs, and I feel great for a week." I'm like, maybe just rubbing your wife's legs doesn't make you happy. I don't know.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear other people having good experiences. Yeah, if you have issues like that, it's worth trying. The worst that's going to happen if you take too much magnesium, like don't go out of control, obviously, but like you're going to poop more, so like your body kind of tells you some of this stuff, and you could do hair mineral analyses on some of this stuff. Magnesium is pretty easy to figure out in my opinion, and most people probably need more, but I take the double route for that personally. One that's, you mentioned leg cramps, potassium comes in with the classic foot cramp. That's basically like the potassium, the potassium deficiency type thing. If you're just low on energy or like feeling fatigued after eating, that could be potassium. So like that's another thing that you could try doing. And some people try to mix potassium into some of the topicals as well. I haven't done that. I've just kind of just started eating a little bit more foods, but you could also mix like potassium chloride with sodium chloride salt into your salt, and maybe even some like cream of tartar is actually potassium bitartrate. You can make like a low salt type thing to kind of bump up the potassium. I think like we're at the point now where you probably had enough podcasts, like salt is not necessarily the enemy, but the data that I look at is showing that it's the ratio of potassium to sodium when it comes to like blood pressure and hypertension. So it's one of those things. Do we need to drop sodium, or do you need to add more potassium? And I'm obviously in the add more potassium camp because I like to salt my meat. So
yeah, salt meat, add potassium, add magnesium.
Lowering insulin levels too, right?
Yeah, and lowering insulin levels.
You're retaining less fluid and salt. Very cool.
I want to talk a little bit about like protein powder, and I know, I want to be mindful of time, but because I get this all the time. I posted a recent comment. I said, plant-based proteins are basically the biggest scam out there right now. And I got a lot of pushback, and, people ask me why. And I think you probably know some of those answers. And, I think we've learned a lot about the protein industry over the last about 10 years. And particularly over the last 5 years, I've learned a lot about the protein industry. So can you walk people, if they wanted to supplement with protein, and, what your thoughts are on sort of, egg protein, whey protein, like what do you, what's your take on all these? I certainly have an opinion, but I want to hear yours.
Okay, my opinion is going to be obviously meat and chicken first and all that first. Beyond that, all right. So if you're trying to build muscle and anything, like, there's no better gold standard than whey protein. And there's different classes of it. We're even getting into like super hydrolyzed clear whey proteins now that we work with that are pretty fun. And there's a lot of data supporting just having protein before breakfast and everything. Whey protein isolate's going to be like the most filtered, more protein by weight, less lactose. Whey protein concentrate, and so whey protein isolate's about 90% protein by weight, and so you're going to get a lot of protein per like pound of in your tub and everything. And then whey protein concentrate can be anywhere from like 35 to 80%. So you kind of want to look at like what's in the label, and then and so like those are the gold standards. Now, what a lot of people like myself have realized after turning 30 or so start becoming what we consider to be lactose sensitive, which I now believe to be like subclinical vitamin A toxicity for me. There is going to be a little bit of vitamin A in all the dairy and everything. So I am mostly off of a lot of dairy. And so that kind of gets me to consider switching. And a lot of people are off dairy. It gets you to consider switching to other things. Well, there's not really good chicken protein powder out there. A lot of the beef protein powder is really just collagen. You got to be careful with that. Otherwise beef protein powder costs like a ton of money. And so, and collagen's great, but it's not a muscle building protein. It's great for like hair, skin, nails, all the, and the amino acids we don't get enough of, like glycine, proline, all that stuff. So I am a fan of the collagens, but for muscle, it comes down to whey and pea protein. And pea and rice oftentimes blend well together, just like rice and beans. You got to have complementary amino acid profiles to work with each other. The issue with the plant-based proteins is going to be the heavy metals. I mentioned copper before. Some of the other fat, I'm not sure if they're fat soluble, but you have like arsenic, lead, cadmium. Those are the other three to watch out for. The best you could do is like go through the sites that were mentioned earlier on and look at lab tests. I don't really know what to say, but like, I don't want any of that in my body. So you have to be very picky. And that's where like some of the best tasting stuff, like maybe Now Foods doesn't have the best tasting stuff, but I know they test really well, so it is a challenge. And so I am pretty limited on the, on the products I like. My favorite plant-based protein powder is this is, disclaimer, business relationship. Astroflave has one called Vegan Mix, and they have iso mixes their whey isolate. Vegan mixes their plant-based protein. I just love their vanilla. I don't know what the lab tests are, I'll be honest. So in general, I think like a few scoops here or there, like a few scoops per week is okay. But if you're like slogging down tons and tons of this stuff, I think eventually, like if you did a hair mineral test, you might start noticing that your like selenium's dropping, your arsenic's going up, or cadmium's starting to go up. And that's the only way to test is like, the only way to know is to really start testing, looking at the test and looking at tests on yourself. So I'm a meat first guy,
How about egg white
100%.
protein? Is there benefit to egg white protein?
Well, if you don't get the bad gas, then yeah, I do like egg whites as
a powder.
well.
Yeah, I was just curious, like they have
actually,
powders of it.
Brian, when Clean Label Project looked at the contaminants, BPA, heavy metals, cadmium, arsenic, lead, what Mike just mentioned, this was back in 2018, and then 2019 was the Consumer Reports, or 2020 was the Consumer Reports article. They found the plant-based proteins had by far the most heavy metal, basically contamination, right? Or maybe it's a process on how they, do these. So I can't figure out a good reason to do a plant protein. I can't figure out one.
Well,
right?
I think the reason is that if you're vegan and you want to, not have sarcopenia, like their leaders, you look at these guys, you go, man, I would take my chance on a little heavy metal poisoning to get some muscle mass if I was those guys. But
I don't
and I know Health Code, who sponsors my other podcast, Life's Best Medicine, they have a new fermented plant protein that's supposed to be better absorbed. I don't know much about it, but I mean, it's nice to have that option for our patients who are vegan, or say, look, I have ethical reasons or religious reasons not to eat meat. Then you go, okay, we got to get protein somehow. If I can get them to eat eggs, I feel a lot better about that.
Right.
Even though I might cause vitamin A toxicity now.
Just one last say, very few have it. I was surprised because it was the egg proteins that had the least contaminants, and whey protein was just right up there, second place. Much more likely to be in the chocolate varieties, which I found interesting. Maybe the way they sort of process cacao, another plant-based product. So it seemed to me like, look, if you have the option, and you tell me, Mike, if this was your kid taking it, would you say pick egg and whey first, and then, and would you then, sort of segue into the other plant protein last?
Yeah, and I would stick with vanilla. So the issue with chocolate, all you chocolate lovers out here, sorry, but you got to watch out for copper toxicity with that. So, and the cadmium. Yeah, you got it.
And cadmium is associated with coronary calcifications. They've done, CAC wide, they've done sort of these observational studies with just CACs and correlation studies with CACs. And the cadmium level is, the higher it is, basically the more CAC. So these heavy metals are not good, not good. Or at least they're associated with bad things.
Right. And yeah, so a couple of the other minerals that I do like to kind of compete with that is selenium and molybdenum. I think those help the liver process. It's tough to tell because like the deficiencies, people who are deficient are often sick. Are they sick because they're deficient, or are they deficient because their sickness pulled them deficient? Either way, selenium is like one that I think is important, and molybdenum isn't talked enough about. They're both copper antagonists too. I'm not sure about the cadmium side of things, but they may help as well. So like that rounds out like all the minerals that I'm pretty like really happy with. But no, in general, I would try not to rely on the an insane amount of plant proteins. But if you guys have to live in a world where you do deal with vegans, and you have 100,000 followers on Twitter, so you probably have a lot more comments on that stuff. I have the luxury of not having to fully engage. If someone's going to be a vegan, another option, essential amino acids. You can get vegan fermented essential amino acids, and you want to make sure it's labeled like that. And there's no test to show that it's to prove that it is. So they could be lying, but like back in the day, they used to get amino acids from like horsehair and duck feathers. So like it's a possibility, but you can supplement with some essential amino acids. They do need to be flavored with sucralose or stevia, all that stuff. So that's another alternative to get them like right into the bloodstream and everything. But yeah, in general, like I simply just can't recommend anyone actually being vegan. That's just where I stand. So I guess I don't have to worry about it as much, but once you're in that route, then yeah, you have to quote unquote pick your poisons. And so I would take a pea rice blend personally, and see like, look at the beans you can consume that don't jack you up, that aren't high in copper. And yep, we got something, Tro.
Tro's escaping us.
Oh,
He's
I'm
escaping
gonna
us.
let you guys
So then
finish
we
up.
could ask the hard questions now.
All right,
Complicated
Tro,
science.
thank you so much though. I greatly appreciate
Mike, it's
you.
always a pleasure. I'll give you a call afterwards, man. Thank you.
Awesome.
And I'll let you guys continue, Brian. Thank
Okay,
you.
All right.
sweet.
Mike,
Brian, let's
thanks
do
for
it.
joining us. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks.
So we did
So,
talk
yeah,
Tro now.
Yeah. So yeah, as you could tell, like I get a lot into the science and the diet side of things. So it's fun for me because, it is a marketing heavy type of industry, and you start to try to like build up a network of the good guys who's doing this stuff right. And it becomes more tough to do it right. A lot of people, like, I said, they say this is unregulated, but there's actually there's a ton of regulations. There's, we have a podcast where we actually are media partners now, as of like yesterday, with the Natural Products Association. And we go to Washington, DC, and we lobby. And we are the only industry, and I'm maybe not the only industry, but we joke that we're the only industry that actually lobbies, not for more laws or rules. We lobby to get our laws enforced. That's the issue, because there are plenty of regulations on the whole thing. And so I have some notes here. I don't know if it's a huge deal or whatever, but like pretty much, there's definitions of what is a supplement. There are laws in terms of labeling. There's laws in terms of quality. And originally dietary supplements, and I'm talking about US, dietary supplements were created to actually, reside under like the food. It's the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. They're under the purview of foods, but when it comes to the actual like quality manufacturing standards, it's actually more like the drug manufacturing standards. So it's like a subset of that. And then you have the pre-market like ingredient pillar. What is actually all permissible as an ingredient, and what's been grandfathered in since like the law is called DSHEA 1994. The Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994 defines what can be a supplement. Things that were sold as supplements before that are kind of grandfathered in. If you want to have a new dietary ingredient, this is where people think it's like unregulated, but it is not a permission process. It is a notification, not an approval. So you notify the FDA, give them all this safety data, 90 days, all this, and then they have 90 days to respond, and they can reject it. Otherwise they acknowledge it, but they don't approve it. And so that's where some of this comes in, and that's called the NDI process. And then the fourth pillar is the adverse event reporting system, which is, I think, basically just a copy paste of the drug reporting system. So we do have a lot of these things, but yeah, you want to make sure that you get something that is like kind of tested by these people. So these are the things that you start reading these lawsuits and you start getting into this world, and I'm in deep, man. So like, besides the science stuff, there's a lot of fun regulatory stuff as well. But
plus you just get to know people, and you go, okay, I trust this person. I trust their integrity and what they're doing. And you can see they're doing the right thing. And so that's why I would be curious, like certain companies, like, for me as a primary care doc, and I don't know if you have ever come across these companies or not, but like Metagenics. Does that name ring a bell? Is that
No,
something you go, these guys are pretty legit, decent stuff? Like,
no, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to kind of like audit them and see like, honestly, I'd ask where they're manufactured and then start contacting someone like myself. If they're not willing to disclose their manufacturer, even under an NDA, then the big problem. But there are some really good manufacturers out there. There's a lot of no-name people. And then I would be looking for like, is that manufacturer, have they been audited by the FDA? Are they NSF certified? If so, then that's like really good news and everything, and start going down the rabbit hole. If this company is just looking for the cheapest manufacturer out there and it bounces around, or they don't have third-party lab tests that they're willing to share with you, then those are red flags in your line of business. Like we're talking about very sick people that you deal with. We're not talking about 20-year-old Joe trying to like get a pre-workout supplement with 300 milligrams of caffeine or more, so, and even that is still important. We still want it. The laws are there to test.
yeah, and you just
So,
want to, if you're going to recommend a product, you want to make sure that's why what you're doing is important because, for me, I go, okay, take Berberine. Okay, you can go to Amazon, get it. You can go here, get it, go to wherever. And so it's hard to say, okay, I don't know their quality controlled Amazon. I mean, they could have just total garbage in there, right? So I don't know. So for me, what I like to do is find good companies and go, okay, give my patients a 10% discount. I don't, so because the other issue we run into is conflict of interest. So if I go, oh, I can get a contract with this Berberine company, and then I charge all my patients 20% to get, I mean, then you go, okay, you have a conflict of interest now, right? So one of those things I like to do with companies is say, hey, look, just give my patients a 10% discount, and like they can just go straight to you, and I'll just send them your way, right? So I like to deal with companies like that where I go, okay, I want a good quality. If they're going to take a supplement, if they want to know if Berberine works, I want a good quality. That's going to absorb, that's going to be good. So if they take some garbage stuff, it's not going to work. And they go, yeah, berberine doesn't work for me. Well, no, you had a bad product that wasn't working for you, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how you do show notes. Like I can link to like a lot of the stuff I've talked about, but yeah, Now Foods has just posted like their berberine tests and everything. So there are definitely some that have failed on Amazon and everything. So it's the issue is like, so these manufacturers, they should be testing all the materials on the way in, put it into quarantine until the tests pass, and then test the finished product on the way out. And unfortunately, not everyone's doing that, and that's where we definitely do need more enforcement. And so, yeah, a lot of the berberine out there is junk. And that's why I do like the dihydroberberine that we work with and everything. Also because the lower doses and stuff.
Yeah,
So
and I would love to mess around with that, Tro, and I would love to mess around with those things and say, okay, let's get a CGM on my patient and add some stuff and see what happens, right? See how we do with their actual sugar control in real life situations. And so it's kind of cool to see it offhand. And I've seen some cool stuff where you go, wow, that's pretty amazing. So I've had people take supplements I never heard of. I'm like, heck, your sugars got better. Let's see what that is, right? Let's see if it works for other people, if it works for you. So it's kind of cool that we have this industry. And so if you're talking about an average like middle-aged guy, weekend warrior, gained 20 pounds over the last 10 years, whatever, and they go, hey, Mike, what supplement should I take? What are some low-hanging fruit that you go, hey, this is a good bang for your buck, right? Creatine, you add in creatine, you add in berberine, like what are things that you go, these are probably for a majority of people without doing a bunch of testing. These are reasonable things that we're seeing deficiency in.
Well, okay, all the minerals we kind of talked about first: magnesium, potassium, selenium, zinc, molybdenum. So that's the first pillar. I am definitely a believer, like, and then the diet stuff, of course. Like the meat will have to require you to take less creatine, but creatine, it's not essential. It can be endogenously created. It is expensive, metabolically expensive for your body to create this molecule, and it holds our ATP in our muscles. It doesn't hold ATP in the muscles, but we store creatine in the muscles so that we can use it as a phosphate donor to create more ATP, which is the actual like cellular energy. That's our unit of energy, our energy currency, as we write. And like ATP is the energy, not calories. So anyway, so creatine helps with that. I definitely believe in it. How much do you need? 3 to 5 grams a day, 5 if you're big, but if you're eating a lot of meat, it might just be like maybe 1 or 2. Like males generally excrete 2 grams of creatine a day. So that's like kind of like the minimum just in case. And but yeah, so that's one. I don't know if like creatine is not exactly associated with weight loss though. It's more like for lean muscle gains and everything like that. So aside from like getting if someone's going for a diet, yeah, my fat burning stack, first off, we could talk caffeine. Like you're going to get modest gains with caffeine, whether it's coffee or having a supplement with caffeine. Obviously, like beware of the liquid coffee drinks and all that. Like, I don't think we need to explain not adding junk to your coffee and everything.
Mochachinos and all that stuff for breakfast. Yeah.
Right. So I am a proponent of caffeine. Like, obviously know your limit. And for people who are caffeine sensitive, we are in business with this company. So caffeine, what's cool about caffeine is that, well, not what's cool. Sometimes it's the problem. There's 3 types of different responders. You got fast metabolizers, medium, and slow. And the people who are slow metabolizers just get wrecked by caffeine. If you know some people like, oh, I can't even have a cup of tea, I'll be up all night. They're probably a slow metabolizer, and it's genetic. So when you ingest caffeine, it's actually broken down into 3 metabolites. You have paraxanthine, which is about 84% of it's that. That's actually, paraxanthine is doing all the good stuff, all the heavy lifting. But then you have theobromine and theophylline. Theophylline is a bronchodilator drug, and these have like way longer half-lives, like 9, maybe more hours if you're a slow metabolizer. And these are what wreck you. So what some of my friends in business, we do some marketing with them, have created, they are creating a paraxanthine ingredient, which has been difficult to create. It's called the trade named Enfinity, ENFINITY, and it's just paraxanthine. So you skip the other metabolites you don't need, and you get the paraxanthine, and it has some of the fat burning like benefits of caffeine without the bad side of caffeine. So there's a couple products that are out that have that. Like Muscle Tech has a fat burner and a pre-workout with that. And so that's a caffeine alternative. That's really good. There's an energy drink called Update, for instance, that you can. So it's worthy of trying, because you can get a little bit of a fat burning kick out of that. Now, besides that, that's a stimulant, and there's other stimulants as well. Like, some of them are no longer legally sold as dietary supplements. Ephedrine, for instance, which I don't know if we need to go there. You can go to the pharmacy. It works. And it got banned because people were out of control back in the days.
They were overdosing like huge amounts, right?
It was, we didn't have the quality control. And so you had these ephedra products that like literally 10x of what I would recommend. But if anyone says that it doesn't work if even like a small 20 milligram dose of ephedrine doesn't work for fat burning, they're wrong. I mean, I'm sorry, but obviously it can come with some heart issues, especially in the higher doses. And a lot of your clientele is going to be, cardiovascularly challenged, whatever. It's you got to obviously be careful, but it is there. There are similar stimulants such as synephrine that increase energy expenditure. We're talking about like 75 calories a day or so, that work in similar ways. But ephedrine, which is not a dietary supplement, is probably like one of the stronger ones that is out there in like, some of the asthma drugs. Some of the other ingredients I like that we work with are, there's one called Mitoburn. It's a non-protein amino acid called L-beta. And so when you start working out or exercising or moving around a lot, the branched chain amino acid valine, which is one of the 3 BCAAs, that breaks down into L-beta. And so beta then is sent to the other muscles. It's a messenger. It's a myokine, like muscle messenger, telling your body that, hey, exercise is going on. And so it starts upregulating some of the exercise, like quote unquote programs in your body, such as beta oxidation, ketogenesis, and bone density protection, a lot of cool stuff like that. So some scientists on mice started testing if they just supplemented more beta, does it affect as well? And the answer is yes. So like, some people like to call it the exercise molecule. Like, it's not exercise in a pill, but it provides some, it like kind of ramps up exercise a little bit more. And what it also
helps with exercise performance.
I don't have human data to prove that.
Oh yeah.
Me, like,
but
it gives you
subjective.
half a year. Yeah.
So,
but what it does
is more
is
fat oxidation in the muscle.
Well,
is this right?
What it's doing is it's actually helping to convert to beige, not brown, but beige, some of your white adipose tissue, making them more mitochondrial dense. So a couple mechanisms that it helps will like create mitochondrial biogenesis, and you're getting a little bit more brown fat deposit, like mitochondrial tissue in some of the subcutaneous fat, turning them from that energy like consumer
storage to burning.
Exactly. Storage of burning, a little bit more thermogenic. And then there are some like spices, like grains of paradise, like, so grains of paradise, calorie burn is the trade name, or the capsaicin type ingredients that can actually upregulate the brown adipose tissue. So you get this 1-2 bang. But if you go too high on those, And so, yeah, you do get a little bit heated. You do get, and these do have human data and everything. Like, again, 70 calories a day or so, at about 40 milligrams per day. And Grains of Paradise is actually a great black pepper. And if you're cooking, great black pepper alternative. It tastes really good. It's like it's in the ginger family. So I'm a fan of those. Those are some of the cooler fat burning ingredients that we've been dealing with. And there's and so that's most of it for me. But and then there's like Yohimbe is out there, but that like kind of blocks fat storage. That might make you anxious. So like be careful of that. It's like it's an aphrodisiac stimulant.
Yeah, you hear about that, right? Hey, I have
Yeah,
a
at the gas
question for you. I don't
stations.
know. I don't know if you cross paths, but I keep saying things about methylene blue. Do you know anything about that, or any benefits, or any risks, or anything like that?
The guy who introduced me to vitamin A toxicity is going down that rabbit hole right now. I don't know. No, I don't know anything about it.
All right. Yeah,
I've
I was
heard some
curious.
good
I was
things.
just curious because I see all these people saying, "Oh my gosh, my life got better and my energy and all that." So, I always have to look back to the science. And Ben Bickman's talking about creatine helping with mental functioning
Oh
mitochondria. So
yeah.
I think a lot of us are coming back to this whole thing of mitochondrial health to go get
Yes.
your mitochondria healthy, and then you do better. So, we hear about these cellular detoxes and all this. So I just don't know enough to say, yeah, this is super beneficial.
Right. Yeah. I think creatine definitely has enough data that it's like
Yeah.
between performance, but also cognition, especially in the vegan vegetarian crowd, overall well-being. It's been tested in young youth, adolescents. Like unless someone's got horrible kidney disease, I am not concerned. And even then there's a paper out there where the researchers postulate if people have bad kidney disease and they're on a low protein diet, the creatine might actually help. So there's two sides of all these different coins. So yeah, 3 to 5 grams a day. It's cheap anymore. I mean, the prices went up in 2020, 2021, but it's cheap. So that's like,
Do you have a manufacturer you like for creatine?
um, I mean, besides like the standard Now Foods, another company that does third-party testing is NutraBio.
How
And
about
then
Thorne, Thorne?
Thorne is good. Yes.
Okay.
Thorne is trusted. Yeah. That's
Yeah, I've
going to be more
heard,
expensive.
yeah. So I was just curious, like, you just want to make sure if you're going to supplement, do the right stuff. And, I think we're all saying, hey, watch your stress, get your sleep, get your life in order, stop putting in the toxins and, addition and subtraction and all these things we talk about. It's like, take out the harming thing, get out of the sun when you're sunburned, and you'll probably heal.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I think creatine, it's so funny. We still see the propaganda about it. I don't understand. Like maybe Tro would like to get into it, but it's almost like part of the anti-meat agenda sometimes. And I'm like, there's just too much. There's like 300 studies. I mean, how much data do you need
Yeah, it's
before
hard.
we can show that this
There's
stuff's
so
safe?
much data, and it's the same thing. You hear this all the time, and you go, okay, like all the time. Jason Fung, who's a nephrologist, is saying, look, high protein does not hurt the kidneys. And he goes, if you take more protein in and your kidneys are damaged, you're going to spill more protein. If we're measuring creatine levels and you're taking creatine, the level may go up a little bit. It doesn't mean your kidneys are failing. It just means you have more creatine in your system. So
Yeah.
people with more muscle mass, their creatine's higher than people with skinny old ladies, right? So there's a lot of stuff like that where people just don't understand the science, and so it's so frustrating. But you don't want to do stuff like to harm yourself. And it's funny because I hear about people supplementing with the vitamin A, and you're like, get rid of vitamin A. It's like, why are you supplementing with it, right?
Do we have time to go over that? Like, I'd like to.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so and on the note of kidney disease, that's kind of where it started. So here's like this is going to be controversial. And I think within 5 years, people are going to be on this page. So like, here we go. I really believe this is a new paradigm. So the indisputable facts is that vitamin A it's arguably an essential vitamin for growth and everything, for vision. We hear that a lot, but it's indisputable that it is a class of molecules. We're going to say retinol is vitamin A, but this whole class of molecules I kind of went over with beta carotene, they're fat soluble. They're difficult to metabolize out, and they accumulate over time. And it is indisputable that they are harmful in excess. There is just too much data showing vitamin A toxicity. Then I'm talking about birth defects, and hypervitaminosis A is one of the medical terms. So these are indisputable facts. And so given that it accumulates over time, it's almost like it's a game of time. And as we see like diabetes and weight go up over time, we see the exact same thing with a lot of the vitamin A levels. It accumulates. So where this kind of started was, and I don't want to tell his story, but there was a gentleman named Grant Genereux, who's a Canadian, brilliant Canadian engineer whose health was failing more and more over the course of years. And around like, and so he had kidney disease and he was going through kidney failure, but he was most concerned about his eczema. His eczema was so itchy that he he had to do something about this. It was more, it was his biggest concern. So he went on the internet, the doctors say, oh, it's not food. It's not, not the food you eat. And he goes on, and he's like, well, maybe it is food. And so he looks up, maybe it is, so he looks up eczema foods, and somehow he glues together that the high eczema foods are also high vitamin A foods. And he's been eating tons and tons of milk. And so he's like, well, you know what? I got nothing to lose. I'm going to stop ingesting all this stuff. And he goes on what he considered to be a low vitamin A diet. It was actually, in my opinion, a normal vitamin A diet, or a lower vitamin A diet than most people. Basically, ground beef, which does have retinol. A lot of people get that wrong. Ground beef, beans, and rice. I think. And this is basically what you call the cowboy diet. All his issues over the course of 9 years now, basically all these issues slowly start resolving. He wrote a big blog post, kind of ranting over what he's learned, and he writes a couple ebooks, and he starts getting a following of people that are following in his forums and everything. So that's kind of going on. And so when I started learning about this vitamin A thing, and I told you, okay, I already knew about the beta carotene issues. I started thinking back in, and you start looking at how vitamin A is metabolized, and you get, so you have retinol. It gets in the active form of retinol of vitamin A is retinoic acid. It's also known as tretinoin or all-trans retinoic acid, and sold as retin A. And then that's metabolite. The metabolite of that is 13-cis retinoic acid, also known as isotretinoin, also known as Accutane. And beyond that, if you want to go even further, 9-cis retinoic acid, alitretinoin, sold as Panretin, is actually used as chemotherapy. So you're like, okay, we've seen a lot of data on how hazardous Accutane can be. People get wrecked from this stuff.
Depression, anxiety, birth
yes.
defects, and they go, you have to be on birth control. You cannot be having sex. It's that bad.
Okay. And so there are studies showing that every time you ingest vitamin A, some of it does get metabolized into that. Not all of it, but some of it. So I'm going down this rabbit hole, and I'm thinking, okay, I drank tons and tons of milk and fortified cereals. And then here's the part, I had a bad bout of eczema. And this is the part I can't confirm, Brian, but the back then I had an embarrassing case of eczema right on my butt cheek. And I remember this very vividly, obviously, itching to the point, just like Grant Generou was.
Yeah, miserable.
Yeah. And so I remember going to the dermatologist. They gave me the UV light treatment. Cute nurse. I should have been embarrassed, but I just wanted this thing to be helped. Yeah. And I swear that was around 3rd or 4th grade. I cannot confirm my family. This is when my health started to get to deteriorate in terms of gaining fat. You start seeing that some of these metabolites, such as the 13-cis retinoic acid sold as Accutane, induces insulin resistance. And you start seeing that the transport protein for this, RBP4, is all over the place with all the stuff you guys deal with, the cardiovascular disease, the insulin resistance, greater incidences of diabetes. It goes up over time, lower testosterone. It's all over the place. And so how this is started to come out is that so Grant Generou is doing this stuff. People are digging through PubMed, and it turns out there's this researcher named Anthony Mawson, Mawson. And so he's got 100 papers published about all sorts of stuff. This guy's got to be interesting, but he's looking at public health matters, but also behavioral stuff like mass panic and everything. And so he has this paper from 2000.
We haven't seen that anywhere, have we?
No. Yeah. He's probably, yeah. He's been working hard. So I just added him on LinkedIn. So I have some questions for him, but he posted this paper in 2009 with a new theory on violent behavior. So apparently, and I didn't know this, I don't know if it's even true, but apparently violent behavior is associated with people with lower heart rates. He connects that to some animal research where prenatal exposure to too many retinoids. You don't want to be zero, I don't think. I do think it's essential. I think too many is the problem. That is associated with lower heart rate. And he makes this connection that when the liver gets sick, through whatever mechanisms, whether it's too much vitamin A or some other liver injury, the liver gets sick. Occasionally, there will be moments of spillover of retinoids into the serum. And so this spillover wreaks tons of havoc, especially if it's unbound retinol esters. But you have the retinoic acids getting converted into the Accutane chemicals and all that, but also unbound retinol esters, because in your liver, they're stored as retinol palmitate, usually like a retinol fatty, combination. And so he connected this and saying that when the spillover occurs, that's when we have bouts of sickness. He then goes on to publish all these other papers connecting connecting this like toxic spillover of retinoids with glioma, influenza, childhood learning disabilities like malaria, Zika, Gulf War illness, coronavirus. And it all starts to glue together. And he over the course of time, like expands on this theory and can connect it to all these different failing organ systems. And the Gulf War illness one's pretty wild because I know of some people that like they got pretty messed up from the anthrax vaccine back in those days.
I've seen
and
it.
so he connects that liver injury causing cholestasis. So you're not able to get the bile out into the poop. It starts coming back up into the bloodstream. And then all these retinoids, whether they're retinol esters or retinoic acids, start wreaking havoc on everyone. So I'm like, okay, so this is, to me, like this is the glue of everything. And I think it is the missing link of what is happening, because if you look at the data, and so the problem is it's hard to test. You have to, serum retinol is going to be kept in a homeostatic range. But if you're on the higher end of the range, things are probably on their way to going wrong. But the best way of testing is with a liver biopsy. Unfortunately, that's of course dangerous and it's prohibitive and everything. But if you start looking at the liver biopsies of deceased individuals, and there's many studies all over the world, you're going to find that about 30 to 40% of them are in de facto gold standard hypervitaminosis A. And the last study was in America, 2018, 9 out of 27 people were vitamin A toxic. So like, I think that there is a lot of people who have subclinical vitamin A toxicity, all these skin diseases that are happening and stuff. We like to point at the seed oils. We like to point at too many carbs. I'm starting to point it at excessive retinoid intake. We've been fortified since forever. It's sometimes been experimented as a vaccine adjuvant. We are putting it on our faces. It's in the milk. It's in milk without adding more to milk, but then we fortify even more. And then we have Sean Baker come out with this like all muscle meat carnivore diet, which is very low in vitamin A, but everyone's like, no, you got to eat liver. And you start seeing people getting sick by eating this disgusting tasting liver.
Amen, man. I'm glad to hear that.
Oh, okay.
I hate liver. I'm with you, man.
Well, you gotta listen to your taste buds.
I'll die. I'm not gonna eat liver. No, ain't gonna happen.
And no
So it
matter
makes
which way you
sense.
turn.
And I'm telling you, so many people I've had, they give up dairy and their eczema gets better. And they go, I thought it was like the whey protein, the protein in the dairy or the casein and whatever. But man, you start looking and go, wow. So I've seen that too. The carnivores, it's ridiculous. Their mood gets better, stress levels, all kinds of stuff gets better. And like, why isn't? I'm always wondering, is it addition or subtraction? Are they getting some nutrient that they needed? Or is it that they're taking away? And if it's this, decreasing the vitamin A toxicity.
I will send you, I'm working on something as big. I will send you everything I can, because I truly think it is something. I know that, and we could argue about the egg thing. Like, I just don't think it's natural for us to be schlonking 6 eggs a day. Like one egg a day, totally cool and everything. So that's where I land with that. But you look at and I mentioned the RBP4, the retinol binding protein 4. It's correlated with all the stuff you guys work with. I'm like, this is the missing piece of the puzzle. It's just like,
yeah, I think we have to keep
crazy.
an open mind and go, okay, let's cut this out and see what happens. Let's add this in and see what happens. And I think that's what we all have to individually. And some people, maybe it doesn't affect them to eat 20 eggs a day. And other people, they have 2 and they feel like garbage, right? So it's really trying to figure that out. Do you do, more egg whites, get rid of the egg yolk sometimes, or whatever, just trying to figure out that. And with time, we'll all figure, we'll get better ideas on these things, and we'll probably have some binders to get rid of excess vitamin A, whatever. You think I kind of figured that out.
It's a slow process. And that's what's crazy to me is I had my blood work. I got to post it on my Twitter and everything, but I've been on a very low vitamin A diet for a year. My numbers are still through the roof. I have so much of this stuff in my system. Like, people worry about vitamin A deficiency. I've done like very low for a year. I'm still on the upper end of retinol and RBP4 on the upper end of the reference range. I knew it because I've heard people say this is a slow detox. You got to strap in for 4 to 5 years. I had effects starting at like 3 months, my joints and everything. That might've been the vitamin D thing. But so I knew it was going to be bad, but I was like, man, this is going to be a slog. And I'm down to try it, and I'm down to see how much it is. The one, and the best effect that I've had, honestly, not waking up in the middle of the night to pee. My PSA level is like 0.1, and I sleep through the night. My energy has been incredible. My focus. We had a crazy Black Friday thing with PricePlow and everything, and one of our employees said, "Dude, you're a machine." I was waking up at 3 a.m. to work on stuff while hanging out with family the other day. I do feel that good, and I'm not on any of this any of
And
this
this
stuff.
is mostly from cutting vitamin A.
The nighttime urination,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. And
Wow,
so
it's amazing.
it feels like my body's starting to listen to me a little bit more. But like I was saying, I have been able to add more carbs in. So I removed the eggs, and mostly pork. Like pork, sorry, but it's just it's just not a good fatty acid profile anyway.
Yeah, I don't think it's good. I mean, there's a lot of toxicity in pork and all that stuff, and especially
Yeah.
what they're feeding them these days and the chemicals and all. There's so much to that too, and I think that's a reasonable thing. And saying, okay, let me cut back on these things, see how I feel,
Mhm.
and go from there. And that's
Yeah.
what's cool. It's like we're always experimenting and trying to figure it out and pulling levers, and you go, okay, let's pull this lever. If I got eczema every day, let me try giving it up for a month and see what happens, right? And that's what we see. And when people change their diet and I mean, there's discussions about lectins causing this, and they go, okay, if it's vitamin A, then we look at that and see.
Mhm.
Let's decrease vitamin A and see what happens.
I am extremely confident it's the missing link. I'm all about it. And here's the craziest thing is like you see some of the stuff that we're inundated with. Glyphosate inhibits the retinoid metabolism. So like now you got to be all organic. The muscle meat carnivores, they're skipping that too. So like in my opinion though, the problem with the carnivore diet is you're not pooping enough out. And that's where I am cool with like adding some apple, adding some fiber, because we need to get it down, bile down into the stool, not up into your gut and GERD. I don't want to hang around the liver. I don't want hanging around anywhere. And so I have switched on the fiber thing. I think it's one of those things
plus
that
you're feeding the gut microbiome. There at least some degree of it, right? Some degree of helping the microbiome, because there's a lot of data saying, hey, look, taking a bunch of fiber doesn't help with constipation, doesn't help with certain things. And you go, but is there a benefit of distributing the sugars out more evenly and feeding the gut microbiome, keeping it healthy so it's digesting your food appropriately and all those things.
Right.
So I think these are all questions. Hopefully next time we get back together, we'll have some better answers on it. But I appreciate your talking about vitamin. I've never heard of this before. So I'm like, okay, cool. Let me look at it. I would love to look at your data and what you're doing.
There's a lot. Cool. It's next level. You just got to glue it all together. I'll be happy to share it. And eventually I will have a big post. I'm not sure if it'll be on PricePlow or the main blog. I think you're probably a bit out of time or whatever. I just have
a patient. So,
well, that's more important than me. Brian.
Mike, thanks for joining us. Tell us how people track you down. Where do they find you?
Yes. Oh, okay. So again, thank you for having me on. It's my old AOL Instant Messenger screen name from the 90s, Mike Roberto, MICRO BERTO on Twitter. I'm not really on anything else really. And so I like it on Twitter. And then if it's business related, I'll be on LinkedIn, but Twitter is really the jam. You'll see me arguing about liver and toxicity and all that stuff. That's kind of my thing right now. I'm going to be on this train for at least a few years. I'm going to document it. I know there are concerns with vision, not having them, any of those. I'm not going to be going zero vitamin A. I want to get down to a low point where I think I could fix free testosterone a little bit. So I have this whole thing I'm going to be doing, and I would love to come and report in whether it works
awesome
or not.
Stuff, man, for sure. Yeah. We'll follow up. We'll follow up on that for sure.
Thanks again so much for having me.
No, thanks for joining us, and everyone. This is good stuff. I appreciate it. This is great. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get a better discussion about supplements and what to do, what not to do. Does protein help? What kind of protein? Because these are things that we just kind of go, yeah, we don't know. So having your looking at these things and saying, okay, here's the best. We need sources like that help us to say, okay, what's the best supplements to take? If we're going to take it, let's take the good stuff and not just take garbage and, all the fillers and supplements and additives and colors and all that stuff. It's good to know.
It's all stuff for your liver to deal with. Every time you add Red 40, I don't know how hard it is to metabolize, but it's one more thing to deal with. So you got to think about that for sure. But, and of course, people could also follow PricePlow if you want to see me and Ben doing our thing and everything. So you're not going to see as much of this vitamin A stuff on that. That's more, I'm still on a personal thing here. If I'm coming out talking about this, I got to come with data. So that's
and your personal experience too. When eczema goes away, like so many people just struggle with eczema. And just yesterday I was looking at some ad and they're saying, hey, your kid has eczema, shoot him up with this. Oh, it could cause heart failure, cancer, liver failure. It's like, okay, I'd rather have some skin problems, or I'd rather say, let me try nutritional approaches. Like seriously,
root cause. I know.
You can have we'll just knock your immune system to zero. Oh, that should be great. Right. It's autoimmune. So blessings, man. Thanks so much for joining me. And we'll have a follow-up on this one.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.